If you're a high performer, a builder, well, this one is for you. We're about to tackle a really seductive bug in our thinking, something called the essentiality error. It's that little voice in your head that says you're the secret sauce, that you're the one holding it all together. But what if that very feeling of being essential isn't a strength at all? What if it's actually the biggest flaw in the entire system you're trying to build?
Yeah, just let that one sink in for a second. You're not the hero, you're the bottleneck. The source material for this is incredibly direct. That feeling of being indispensable, it's not a badge of honor. It's actually a single point of failure. It means the entire system you've worked so hard to create is incredibly fragile. So let's dig into why.
All right, let's break down the mechanics of this bug. It's especially sneaky because it preys on the most competent people. The ones who can actually see all the details and connect the dots that others miss. So it feels right to be in the middle of everything, but it's fundamentally architecturally wrong.
So here's the core of it. The essentiality error is that belief that your personal touch, your gut feeling, is the magic ingredient that makes everything work. It's the voice that whispers, hey, only I can handle this crisis, or they need my intuition to make the final call. It's a trap that uses your own competence as the beat. You feel valuable, you feel needed, but what you're actually doing is creating a dangerous dependency.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because it just completely flips the script on what we're taught about high performance. I mean, we're conditioned to think that being needed is a sign of our value, right? But in the world of building something truly scalable, something sovereign, the real goal is to make yourself unnecessary. The ultimate metric of your success is the system's ability to run perfectly without you.
And let's be super clear about the severity here. This isn't just some minor personality quirk or a bad habit. No, from a pure systems thinking perspective, building an operation that depends on one specific person, well, that's the literal definition of a catastrophic architectural failure. It's a system that is designed to be fragile.
And here it is. This is the end game. There is no other outcome. A system that's built around one person has a 100% failure rate. It's not a question of if it's going to fail, but when. When you get sick, when you want to take a vacation, or, when you eventually move on to something else. It is guaranteed to break. So this isn't just some theoretical risk that might happen down the line. The essentiality error has a very real day-to-day cost. It creates a drag on your entire operation. So let's talk about the real price you're paying for this stagnation.
You have to get familiar with this term manual drag. Think about it. Every single decision that has to wait for your sign-off, every question that only you can answer. It's like a data packet that gets stuck in your personal inbox. The whole system slows down waiting for you. This creates what's called systemic latency, and that delay leads to a kind of operational decay where everything just starts to grind to a halt.
And this chart, this shows you exactly what that decay feels like. You get trapped in what's called the maintenance loop. You feel insanely busy, right? But you're not actually moving forward. You're spending the vast majority of your time and energy, like 60%, just acting as a human bridge, doing manual labor to patch up broken processes, instead of spending your time on high-level architecture.
So here's the fundamental problem. Your ambition, your goal, is to run this incredible, multi-threaded empire. Multiple projects, different teams, all running in parallel, all at the same time.
But you're trying to run the whole thing on a single core processor, you. Your personal bandwidth becomes the ultimate bottleneck for the entire operation. It's a total mismatch in architecture, and it just guarantees failure. No amount of hustling or personal heroics can fix a broken system design.
And the inevitable result of that mismatch is something called throughput stagnation. Basically, your empire can only grow as big as your personal stamina allows. And at that point, you're not really leading anymore, you're just overclocking yourself, pushing to your absolute limit just to keep the lights on. You're building a house of cards on a foundation of pure exhaustion.
Okay, so that's a pretty grim picture, I know. Enough about the problem. Let's pivot to the solution, because it's both really elegant and incredibly powerful. It's all about installing what the source material calls an automation engine into your operation.
And this slide just captures that fundamental shift perfectly. If your empire depends on you showing up every day, it's not a real asset. It's just a very complicated, very expensive job. The goal is to move from that to protocol-driven autonomy, where your empire becomes a sovereign asset that works for you, not because of you.
I love this quote. It just nails the required change in your role. You have to stop being a consumable resource, the fuel that gets burned every single day just to keep things running.
Instead, you need to become the architect, the designer of a system that can generate its own momentum, a perpetual motion machine.
So this is the new model we're aiming for: algorithmic leadership. It sounds fancy, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's about taking all of that brilliant intuition you have, all those gut feelings, and refactoring them. You break it all down into a clear set of if this happens, then do that. Rules and protocols that anyone on the team can execute to get a consistent result, all without your direct involvement.
And when you get this right, the benefits are just immense. First, it allows for real iterative scaling because success is now a repeatable process, not a moment of individual magic. Second, it creates what's called strategic silence, that precious mental bandwidth you need to do deep, creative legacy-building work. And maybe most importantly, you build an empire that thrives and grows even while you sleep.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? Let's get into the practical, step-by-step guide. This isn't just theory. This is a real protocol you can start implementing tomorrow to systematically make yourself obsolete, in the best possible way, of course.
First up is another mindset shift. Your job is no longer to be the hero who swoops in and solves problems. That's the old role, the solver. Your new role is the designer. You're the architect who builds systems that prevent those problems from ever even happening in the first place.
And here it is, the three-step protocol. Number 1, audit your decisions. Every time you make an important call, write down the logic. Turn your intuition into a script that someone else can run. Number 2, the protocol first rule. This is a non-negotiable. If you see the same problem twice, you stop fixing it and you start building a system to make sure it never happens a third time. And number 3, systemic obsolescence. Actively train someone else to do what you do. Your goal is to make yourself replaceable.
Now, this number is so important. The goal isn't to create a perfect clone of yourself. The goal is to get someone to perform that function with 80% of your accuracy. Why? Because that remaining 20% gap, that's not a failure. That is the price you willingly pay for your own freedom. Your perfectionism is the enemy of your sovereignty.
So we'll end with this. This is the ultimate question that this entire explainer really boils down to. I want you to take a hard, honest look at how you operate day to day. After everything we've talked about, is what you're building a true, sovereign asset that can outlast you? Or is it just a very demanding, very complex job that falls apart the second you walk away? The answer to that question really determines everything.
If you're a high-achieving leader, I bet you've said this to yourself maybe even today. You know what? It's just faster if I do it myself. It's such a seductive idea, right? The belief that your personal touch, your secret sauce, is the magic ingredient that makes everything work. But what if that belief isn't just a little bit wrong? What if it's the very thing that's sabotaging your entire empire? So let's just cut right to the chase with the most important question you're going to ask yourself all day. I want you to take a really hard look at your operations. Are you truly the essential gear that makes the machine run? Or have you actually become the single point of failure, the bottleneck that's holding everything and everyone back? This brings us to what the source material calls the essentiality error. Now, I want you to think of this as a super seductive but really critical bug in your neural OS, your mental operating system. It's like this flawed piece of code that tricks high performers into thinking their constant, hands-on involvement is a feature, when in reality, it's the system's biggest vulnerability. And yeah, this really puts it bluntly. You might see yourself as the hero swooping in to save the day, but the system just sees you as a blockage. In systems thinking, any process that relies on one single person is, by definition, a system that's designed to fail. That means the very thing you think is your greatest value is actually your system's greatest weakness. So, here's the bottom line. The essentiality error is basically an ego-driven belief. It's the story we tell ourselves that only our intuition can make the final call, that only we can handle the really big crises. But an empire that's built on one person's intuition? Well, that isn't really an empire. It's just a very complex and very, very fragile job. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because this flips everything we've been taught on its head. Our whole lives we're told that being needed is a sign of our worth. But in the world of building a truly sovereign, scalable empire, the ultimate goal is to become unnecessary. That's right. Success is when the system doesn't just survive without you, it thrives. And look, this belief isn't just some philosophical mistake. It has a very real and very high cost. The source material has a great name for it: manual drag. It's this force that's constantly pulling your entire operation down into a state of decay. So let's break down what that actually looks like. Okay, so the first symptom is something called systemic latency. Picture every single decision, every approval, every little question from your team as a packet of data. When you're the bottleneck, all those packets just form this massive traffic jam, this huge queue waiting for you. That delay, the time between a problem popping up and it actually getting solved, that's latency. And it is grinding your entire operation to a halt. And get this, the cost of that latency is absolutely staggering. The source material suggests you could be spending up to 60% of your week just acting as a human bridge between broken processes. Think about that for a second. More than half of your most valuable time isn't spent creating or strategizing. It's spent doing low-level patchwork that a better system should be handling automatically. This manual drag, it leads to this horrible cascading failure. Your brain, your neural OS, gets trapped in what's called a maintenance loop. You're just endlessly focused on keeping the lights on. Because of that, you lose that precious mental bandwidth for pattern weaving, which is that high-level strategic thinking where the real breakthroughs happen. And the result? Throughput stagnation. Your empire hits a hard ceiling, and it can only grow as large as your personal stamina allows. You've hit a wall, and guess what? You are the wall. I mean, this slide just says it all, doesn't it? This is the core architectural flaw. You're trying to run this complex, multi-threaded empire through a single core processor. It's a completely unsustainable design that is guaranteed to overload and eventually to crash. So every time you add a new client, a new project, a new team member, you're not actually strengthening the structure. You're just adding another fragile floor to a house of cards, with all of that weight resting on a foundation that's about to collapse from your own fatigue. So how do we fix this mess? Well, the solution requires a fundamental identity shift. You have to stop thinking of yourself as the fuel that powers the engine, and you have to start seeing yourself as the architect of the engine itself. What this really means is moving from subjective management, which runs on your gut feelings and intuition in the moment, to what's called algorithmic leadership. Now, this is not about becoming a robot. It's about taking your brilliant intuition and encoding it into a clear set of if-then logic gates that your team and your systems can execute flawlessly without you. The goal here is to build what the source calls a self-executing script. This is an architecture where your best, most repeatable decisions are literally turned into permanent protocols. Remember this, an empire isn't made of people. It's made of protocols that people execute. That, right there, is the secret to scale. And this, right here, is the ultimate test. Does your business generate outcomes while you're offline, while you sleep? True sovereignty isn't about being in control of every little thing. It's about building a system that controls itself, generating its own results, all protected by the amazing architecture that you designed. All right, so let's get practical. This isn't just theory, it's an actual protocol for systematically engineering your own obsolescence. And make no mistake about it, making yourself unnecessary is the single most powerful, most valuable move a leader can possibly make. Okay, here it is, the 3-step protocol. Step 1, the Decision-Logic Audit. For 1 week, you're going to document the if-then logic behind every single decision you make. You're turning your gut feeling into a script. Step 2, the protocol first rule. If a problem happens twice, you never, ever solve it again. Instead, you build a system that prevents it from ever happening again. And third, systemic obsolescence. This is where you strategically delegate a key function to a person or a piece of software, and you aim for just 80% of your accuracy. Now, I know that 80% number is probably making the perfectionist in you a little uncomfortable. But what about that 20% gap? You have to reframe how you think about it. That 20%, it's not a failure. It's the price you pay. It is the calculated strategic cost of your freedom, your scalability, and your ability to finally work on the business, not just in it. So, at the end of the day, the choice is yours. You can keep being that single core processor, the fuel that will absolutely, inevitably burn out. Or you can make the pivot. You can become the architect of a self-executing empire. So the question is, are you ready to stop grinding and finally start architecting? All right, today we're going to dive into a mental model that could totally rewire the way you operate. We're talking about moving away from being the person who does all the work to becoming the architect of a self-running empire. It's a huge shift from focusing on your own effort to designing intelligent systems that can scale way beyond you. So let me just ask you this right out of the gate. Are you truly essential to your organization's success? Or have you actually become its biggest bottleneck? Now, I know that's a tough question, but being brutally honest about it is the very first step toward a massive upgrade in how you lead. And that question leads us right to our first big idea, the essentiality error trap. I want you to think of this as a really seductive but incredibly dangerous bug in your mental operating system. It's a trap that so many high performers fall into, especially leaders who are used to being the go-to person for every problem. Okay, so what is this essentiality error? Well, it's the belief that you, your personal presence, your touch, are the secret sauce. But here's the hard truth from systems thinking. Any system that needs one specific individual to function isn't just flawed, it's absolutely guaranteed to fail. You see, you're not the hero in this story. You're the single point of failure. An empire isn't built on people. It's built on standardized protocols that people happen to execute. Now, this quote here really captures the paradigm shift you have to make. We're all taught that being needed equals value, right? Well, this framework flips that completely on its head. For a truly sovereign empire, the ultimate sign of your success is that you've become unnecessary for its day-to-day survival. But here's the thing. Clinging to that old idea of being essential, man, it comes at a staggering price. Your personal involvement, what we can call manual drag, is actually causing the systems all around you to break down and decay. And I'm willing to bet these symptoms sound painfully familiar. Your constant need to be involved creates this manual drag on everything. Suddenly, every decision has to wait in a queue for you. That creates systemic latency, huge delays. You end up stuck in a maintenance loop, spending your entire week just acting as a human bridge between broken processes. And the result? Your growth completely stagnates because the entire empire is capped by your personal stamina. Let me put it this way. You're trying to run this incredibly complex, multi-threaded empire, your business, your team, whatever it is, on a single core processor. And that processor is you. It's just not sustainable, and it's preventing you from doing the real high-level thinking you're meant to do. So how do we fix this? We need a fundamental upgrade. It's time to install what I call the automation engine mindset. And this isn't about buying new software. It's a complete shift in your thinking to what we can call algorithmic leadership. The automation engine is that upgrade. The best way to think of it is as a tool that turns your best instincts, your smartest decisions, into permanent, self-executing code. It's about getting the genius out of your head and embedding it deep into the DNA of your organization. And here's how you do it. Algorithmic leadership means you refactor your intuition. You take that gut feeling and you break it down into a clear set of if this happens, then do that, logic gates. This is how you move away from subjective, in-the-moment management and start building a truly self-executing system. You know, this right here is the ultimate test. Is your empire capable of not just surviving, but actually thriving while you're completely unplugged? If the answer is no, you don't really have a sovereign system. You just have a very, very stressful job. Now, making this shift, it requires a profound change in your identity. You have to stop seeing yourself as the manager of the system and start reprogramming your role to become its architect. You're the one who designs the strategic silence needed to build a real legacy. And just look at the two paths here. On one side, you've got the manager. You're the fuel, you're the hands-on solver, and performance is completely dependent on you showing up. But on the other side, you have the architect. You're the designer, the programmer who builds the business to create its own outcomes. You're enabling an autonomy that scales far, far beyond what you could ever do yourself. Okay, so we've covered the why and the what. Let's get down to the how. To actually make this happen, you need to install what's called the replacement protocol. This is the concrete, nuts and bolts execution engine for your new empire. It really boils down to 3 simple, actionable steps. First, you do a decision-logic audit. For 1 week, just document the if-then script behind every big choice you make. Second, you apply the protocol-first rule. This means if a problem comes up more than once, you don't just solve it again, you build a system so it never needs your attention again. And third, systemic obsolescence. You deliberately make yourself obsolete by training a person or a piece of software to do 80% of one of your high-level jobs. And that brings us to this critical number. That 20% performance gap, the part that the system or person you trained can't do as well as you, that's not a failure. That is the calculated, acceptable cost of your freedom. It's the price you willingly pay to buy back your time and your focus so you can work on what really matters. So we end right back where we started, with a choice. The path of the manager is to keep running the machine, forever stuck in that maintenance loop. The path of the architect is to design the machine that runs itself. So, which path are you going to choose? All right, if you're a high achiever, listen up. There is a very seductive bug in your way of thinking that might just be holding your entire operation back. Today, we're diving into a protocol designed to upgrade your role from just being a critical operator to becoming a true architect. So let me ask you this, straight up. Do you believe that you are the secret sauce? That your personal touch, your unique intuition is the one thing that really makes it all work? You know, most high performers do. But what if that belief isn't your greatest strength, but actually your biggest vulnerability? Because here's the brutal truth when you look at it from a systems perspective. You are essential. You are a systemic bottleneck. Any system that relies on one specific person to function is just a ticking time bomb, really. It's a design flaw, not a badge of honor. So how do we fix this? Well, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First, we'll diagnose what's called the essentiality error. Then we're going to calculate the high cost of you. After that, we'll make the crucial mindset shift from solver to designer. And finally, we'll get our hands dirty with a replacement protocol. Okay, let's get right into it. Part 1. We've got to understand the root of the problem. It's this subtle but incredibly powerful bug in your mental operating system, and it's called the essentiality error. So the essentiality error is this deep-seated belief that your hands-on involvement is absolutely critical for anything to succeed. It's when you see yourself as the hero, the indispensable secret sauce, when, in reality, from an engineering standpoint, that dependence is an architectural failure. And this is where we have to totally flip the script on what value even means. Our ego tells us that being needed is a sign of our importance. But in the world of building scalable, resilient systems, being unnecessary is the ultimate metric of success. Think about that for a second. Okay, so we've identified the mental trap, but what's the actual real-world damage? What's the price you pay for being the bottleneck? That brings us to part 2, the high cost of you. You start to see what's called operational decay. First, there's manual drag. Every single decision, big or small, has to cross your desk. That, of course, creates systemic latency, where the whole system slows down, waiting for you. And the final result? Throughput stagnation. The entire operation can only grow as big as your personal stamina allows. It hits a hard ceiling. And to put a number on it, some analyses show that leaders caught in this trap can spend up to 60% of their week just acting as a human bridge, manually connecting broken processes that should be automated. 60%. Imagine what you could do with that time back. I mean, the metaphor here is just perfect, isn't it? You're trying to build this complex, multi-threaded empire that can do a million things at once, but you're forcing it all to run through the single core processor of your own mind and attention. It's just not built to scale. So, we got it. The problem is real and the cost is high. How do we start to fix it? Well, it requires a fundamental shift in your identity. And this brings us to part 3, moving from being a solver to becoming a designer. See, the old model is all about human-dependent performance. It relies on your subjective, in-the-moment management. The new model, the one we want to build, runs on protocol-driven autonomy. It's based on something called algorithmic leadership. So what is algorithmic leadership? It's basically about taking your genius, your intuition, your best decisions, and reverse engineering them. You turn them into a simple set of if-then rules, logic gates that can be executed by anyone or anything in the system without needing you. And here's the ultimate test, right? The real gut check. Is your empire truly sovereign? Can it not just survive, but actually thrive while you are completely unplugged, while you're sleeping? That is the sign of a truly well-designed system. This all leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, the actionable framework. This is what it's all been building to. Welcome to part 4, the replacement protocol. This is your practical path to making yourself strategically obsolete. Now, this protocol has 3 core steps. First, you're going to execute a decision-logic audit, basically writing down your brain's rules. Second, you apply the protocol first rule, never solve the same problem twice. And third, you perform systemic obsolescence, which is all about training your replacement. Let's make that first step super clear. A decision-logic audit looks something like this. You take a common decision you make, like a refund request, and you turn your internal thought process into a dead simple, written rule. If this happens, then do that. No judgment call, no you. Just a clean, automated protocol. This right here is the heart of the protocol first rule. It's a mental switch. It forces you to stop being a reactive firefighter who just fixes things and start being a proactive architect who designs a system where the fire never starts in the first place. And finally, we have systemic obsolescence. This is where you have to get comfortable with good enough. You train a person or a piece of software to do 80% of what you do. Now, will it be perfect? Nope. But that 20% gap in accuracy, that's not a failure. That is the cost of your freedom. And it's a price worth paying every single time. So here's the bottom line. You have a high bandwidth mind. It's built for strategy, for creativity, for seeing the big picture. Stop wasting that incredible resource on low-level, repeatable tasks that a simple protocol could handle for you. Ultimately, this entire process boils down to one powerful idea. The daily grind is a trap. Your real value isn't in doing more work. It's in designing the system that does the work for you. It really is time to stop grinding and start architecting. So, I'll leave you with a challenge to put this into action immediately. Take a look at your week ahead. What is the one high-level function that you are currently the bottleneck for, that you can start making yourself obsolete from starting right now?